This morning we're going to be focusing on Christmas, and we're going to begin with the wise men. That may seem an odd place to begin our look at the birth of Christ, and for those of you who are enjoying Revelation, we'll get back to that in next year, which I know sounds like a long time. See you next year, but it's only 3 weeks, so we'll get to that. But today we're going to look at the wise men, and I believe we can see a lot and learn a lot of how to approach Christmas from the wise men. They were pretty wise, so we can do that. Let's begin. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 2, and let's just begin with reading the Christmas story, the part that Matthew has for us here with the wise men. Matthew chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, "because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go search carefully for the child, and when you find him, report back to me, so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way. And there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. And entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. Now, I don't know about you if you've gotten started on your Christmas shopping. I really haven't done much of any myself, but I know some people think it's a lot of fun. They have a good time with it. Sometimes it can be a little difficult. Maybe you've had that difficulty of finding just the right gift that's in your budget. And maybe you heard about the guy who bought his wife a beautiful diamond ring for Christmas. He had a friend who asked him, he said, "I thought your wife wanted one of those sporty four-wheel drive vehicles." He said, "Yeah, but where am I going to find a fake Jeep?" Okay. There's some things you just can't get away with faking, right? Okay, I'm going to say worshiping Christ is one of them. We can't get away with faking that. It won't work. You might fool a lot of people pretending you're worshiping Christ, but you will never fool God. He knows. He sees right down to the bottom of your heart. He knows if you're worshiping Him in spirit and in truth, and that's what He's looking for. He knows those who are just trying to fake their way through. And it's just a motion thing, a societal thing, a cultural thing. Now, you may fool your wife with a fake ring, or not. Could be a dangerous Christmas morning right there, right? Better hope she didn't get a rolling pin with it also, that kind of a... When I got married, they gave my wife a rolling pin and a cast iron frying pan, and, it was dangerous. Which today, by the way, is our 18th wedding anniversary. And so I survived all of the it's a good thing. And our son is almost 2. We waited a respectable period of time before we had little ones. But anyway, so we're excited and having a good time. But understand this, Christ knows who has come to worship Him ingenuous, seeking Him as their King, and who's come just out of their own selfish motives. And we'll come back to that thought in just a moment. But I wanted today to look at some lessons we can learn from the wise men, and it'll come back to worship. But the first lesson I think we can learn from the wise men is this, that the King has come for those who are looking. The King has come for those who are looking. Oh, that turned out really dark on that screen, didn't it? It's like a dark blue on the computer, but okay. It's a dark, starry night, so we're good. In today's passage, we find Christ has already been born sometime prior to the visit of the wise men, before the Magi show up. We don't know exactly how long of a period, and there's so much with the wise men you can study. There's so much interesting you can study about the star and about the gifts and about all the logistics around them, and that's fun to study, but we're going to focus mostly on the practical today. What we don't know is how long of a time period lapsed between the birth of Christ and the visit of the wise men, other than he was still a baby. And it was sometime after he was born, and some go for a time as long as 2 years. I mean, some scholars go for a time as little as a few days in it. I will disappoint you. Our beautiful nativity scene, we found our missing wise man this year, and so that was cool. Our beautiful nativity scene is not biblically accurate because the wise men and the shepherds did not show up at the same time. Okay, just to give you fairness there, the wise men did come a little later, and regardless of whether it was a long time, a 2-year time, or even just a couple of weeks, as many of the earlier church fathers held, it was. We know clearly from Matthew chapter 2, verse 11, that when they found the Christ, he was not at the stable. Listen to verse 11 of Matthew chapter 2. Entering the house. Where was Jesus born? Stable. Where did the wise men find him? House. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. So some period of time had elapsed between the birth of Christ and the visit of the Magi, and I think we would find in Luke that it had to be a period of at least 8 days, maybe longer. And so we know that. These wise men, we might ask, who were they? The Greek word is where we get the term magi. It's magioi. And really what they were wise men from Persia, maybe even, descended from the order of Daniel and so forth, but that's kind of speculative. But they had been educated. These were wise, educated men. They were scholars. They had been educated in astronomy and religion and medicine. They were very respected in the ancient world, particularly in the Eastern world, and usually held positions as advisors to kings. They were wealthy and powerful. They were the top scholars of their day. These were like, the guys who ran Harvard and Princeton and, whatever other type universities you might think of. That's what these guys would have been like. So these wise men would have been the greatest scholars of their time. And what did they do? They came looking for Christ. They came looking for Christ. And we'll look at the shepherds on Christmas Eve. But one of the things I just love about the birth of Jesus is everyone was welcome. The humble people who worked out in the field, they were announced. The angels told them, and they were welcomed, and they got to come. But these wise men, these top-notch scholars who had wealth and prestige, they also got to come. Jesus was there and available for those who were looking for him, those who would go and find him, those who would go and see him. And so let's go ahead and back up to Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, and we'll take a little bit more of a practical look here at these wise men. It says this: after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, some wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews? For we saw his star." Remember, they studied astronomy. They were very specific about understanding the stars. And it's at its rising, and have come to worship him. Because of their dedicated study, both to the sciences and to the truth of God's word, these wise men followed the star and came in faith asking, "Where is he? Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews?" They came seeking the King so that they could worship him, so that they could bring him their gifts. Can you imagine the type of faith that would have taken? Think about it. I mean, put yourself in their place for a moment. You have seen a star in the sky. You believe that to be a sign from God that the promised king who would someday rule the world, the Messiah, has been born. So you hop on your camel, you leave your families behind for what may easily be a 2-year journey. I mean, transportation was a little bit slower back then. And you got to take the long way around if you don't want to cross the desert, from where they were coming. You're going to go to a foreign country that's ruled by the Roman Empire. You're going to face all of the dangers of getting there, passing borders and bandits and all kinds of difficulties, so that you can go and worship a child who's supposed to be the newborn king of the Jews. Then when you get there, in the land of the Jews, and you start asking around, where's the king? Nobody knows anything about it. They don't have a clue what you're talking about. And finally, you're told where he's supposed to be born, at least what town he's supposed to be in. And in spite of all this, they came. They didn't give up. They kept seeking Jesus. They kept pursuing Jesus, wanting to find Him until they did. That would take some faith, wouldn't it? I would think that would take some faith. I think most of us would get discouraged. I wonder if the people around them thought they were a little crazy, They had money, so it was okay. But don't you imagine that was kind of the reception they might have gotten? And then when they did find Christ, He wasn't in a palace. He didn't wear a crown. He didn't have an army or an entourage of servants. And yet when they found Him, they still bowed. And they gave Him their gifts, and they worshiped. It wasn't what you would expect. I'm going to tell you something. If you follow Jesus long enough, you're going to find out He turns out different than you'd expect. God doesn't do what you expect. He won't fit in your box. He is who He is. But whatever else may be said about the wise men, I think we can learn from them that they had a great faith. And they came seeking the king, and in that faith, and by that faith, they found Him. Now, there's kind of a mystery here. One of the things that I just find amazing about God is He's hidden Himself in plain sight. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo puzzle, He's there the whole time, but nobody's noticed. But God has hidden Himself in plain sight. And for those who look, those who want the truth, those who are diligently seeking Him, they'll find Him. But the reason that so many do not find Him isn't because He can't be found. It isn't because He hasn't revealed Himself. It isn't because He hasn't come to us. It's because they don't want to find Him. People don't want to find Him. The truth is that Jesus, the King, has come, and those who are looking for Him in genuineness found Him. One of the things that just amazes me with the wise men, there's a star in the sky for the whole world to see, and these are like the only guys who notice. The angels appear to the shepherds, and the shepherds come in looking for Him, and they're asking everybody in town, and yet everybody else doesn't seem to go pay attention. It just blows the mind. How can the world be missing such an opportunity? But see, it's those who were interested who found Him, and those who were not interested did miss their opportunity. This is still the way God works. And you can check out what Paul says in Romans. He has put enough in creation itself to point to Him and reveal Him. The heavens declare the glory of God. If a person's truly looking, they'll find Him. The reason people don't find Him is they're not looking. Our sin keeps us from looking. God provides that glimpse of Himself so that those who would seek for Him will find Him. And think about this honestly in our society, in our culture. There are people who don't know Jesus. Is that fair? Here in our community, there are people who don't know Jesus. Yet, if you just walk in the Christmas section of Walmart, they got a whole section of nativity stuff. How can you not know about Jesus? How can you not know? You can pick up Christmas cards and read the gospel on the card aisle. How can you live in our society and not know about Jesus? They have Christmas music declaring Jesus came, playing on every radio how can you not know about Jesus? Unless you're just not willing to see it, like people weren't willing to see the star hanging in the sky. It's the same principle. How can you watch Christmas commercials and movies and cartoons and not know about Jesus? Watch Charlie Brown. He explains it very well. If you guys watch, classic TV. How can they not know? See, the truth is that those who are looking for Jesus, they will find Him. He is available. He is here. But those who just want to be festive, they're going to miss Him. Because Jesus is hiding in plain sight. So let me ask you this morning, which are you? Are you seeking Christ? Are you seeking Christ? Or are you just doing the Christmas thing? I understand. I mean, hey, I got relatives too, you know. There's a lot of pressure. You got to have all the right stuff for Christmas, and every family has their own little traditions. But that's not what Christmas is about. Now, this is nothing new. The wise men came looking for Jesus, and in spite of Him being there in plain sight, there were many people in their world that didn't really want Jesus to come. And here's the second thing I think we can learn from the wise men about Christmas, and that's not everyone wants Jesus, the King, to come into their world. I think we're seeing that in Revelation. The world doesn't want Jesus to come. Look again at Matthew chapter 2, pick up in verse 3. It says, "Now when King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him." Herod was angry and upset, and understand, the people of Jerusalem knew Herod was wicked. He was evil. He had killed most of his own sons because they got too old and he thought they might be a threat to his crown. What is he going to do with some other king? In fact, Herod actually, he was so concerned that people wouldn't cry at his funeral that he gave orders for the top 70 citizens of Jerusalem to be executed when he died, because he wanted to make sure there'd be weeping at his funeral. Now, once he was dead, they decided not to carry out the order. He was not a liked king, but he was a powerful king. He was an evil king. And so when he was disturbed, let me tell you, all Jerusalem was worried about it. This is trouble. Verse 4, it says, "So he assembled all the chief priests and the scribes and the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him." There they're spilling the beans, spilling their guts. "Because that's what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men, and he asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go search carefully for the child, and when you find him, report back to me, so that I too can go and worship him." See, God was messing with their world. Herod didn't like it. Jesus messed with their world, and the rulers didn't like that either. God might be messing with our world, and I'm going to tell you, there'll be people who won't like it. People often dislike when God enters their life, when He starts shaking things up, because it shatters their illusion of control. And let me just tell you right now, if you think you're in control of your life, you are deceived. Okay? You are deceived. How many of you are married? See, you're not in control of your life right there. I mean, just... Okay? But at the end of the day, let me just tell you right now, how many of you have grandkids? You are not in control of your life, let me tell you. But God's the one that's in control. The rest of us, I mean, I can't control the weather. I can't control the fires in California. I can't control all the things that happen. I can't control if there's an earthquake. I can't even control my next breath, really, if God says it's time's up. God's the one in control. And if we deceive ourselves into believing we're in control, it's a deception. It's an illusion. But when God steps in and He starts shaking things up, it shatters that illusion. And Herod did not want God to be in control. Herod wanted Herod to be in control. And you know the story that he even plans to kill all the babies in Bethlehem and does kill all the babies in Bethlehem after Jesus makes his escape. Herod didn't admit his fears to the wise men. Instead, what he does is he tries to use their own faith against them. He says, "When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." Understand, the world still does this. They don't admit that they're afraid of Christ. They just tell you that they don't want to say Merry Christmas because they want to be tolerant and inclusive. But I'll tell you, they still want your Christmas money, don't they? I mean, they would still want you to spend money. They still want it to be a major thing in the economy. They just don't want anything Christian in it. See, what they want to be tolerant, inclusive without Christ. And that means they're going to be intolerant and exclude the King of Kings who came to rule over people's hearts, who is the very reason we're celebrating. And so let me ask you, this Christmas, which worship will you be engaging in? Which worship will you be engaging in? Will you make Jesus the center of your celebration? No matter who objects. Now, guys, we all have family, right? Everybody here has 100% Christian family? Right? Okay, I got some good laughter here. Okay. Are you willing to make Jesus the center of your celebration no matter who objects? That gets rough, doesn't it? But what are we celebrating? What is it really about? Or will you, like the world, opt for a celebration that doesn't upset people? One that really allows Christ, the world, to take the place of Christ. I'm going to tell you, if you're faking your worship of Jesus this Christmas, He won't be fooled. He won't be fooled. Any more than your wife won't be fooled by that fake diamond. But you know what I mean? He won't be fooled. And understand this, if you choose to put Christ first, there will be resistance. There will be. It will happen. It may be in your family, it may be in the world, it may be in your workplace, but there will be resistance. Some people won't like it. And in our cases, usually it is our relatives that we face the harshest time. Are you willing to risk putting Christ first? The wise men did. The wise men did. Third thing I think we can learn from the wise men about Christmas is that God takes care of those who are faithful. If you will be faithful, if you will put God first, let me tell you, God's got your back. He'll take care of you. Look at verse 9. Pick up in verse 9 of Matthew 2. It says, after hearing the king, they heard what Herod said, they went on their way. And there it was, the star that they had seen at its rising. And it led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. There's something really funky going on with this star, that it's moving around and, leading them. But when they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And all three of those were extremely lavish, wealthy gifts. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. The wise men went on a mission to find Jesus, the Messiah, the King. But that mission put them in danger. They may not have realized when they went off, or maybe they were smart enough that they did realize that there would be hostility. But understand, Herod was a dangerous guy. And they were in danger. And God sent them a dream and warned them, said, don't go back to Herod. You go a whole different route home. Don't let him even know where you've been. Why? Because Herod's dangerous. But I'm going to tell you something. They braved the danger. They risked all. They endured all in order to find Christ and worship Him. And God protected them. God sent them a dream and told them how to get home safe. God had their back. Joseph and Mary were also in danger. And we won't look at all the details of that part of the story, but you know the story that Herod had the babies in Bethlehem killed. They knew Herod was a dangerous person. They knew he would be searching. And again in that story, an angel appears to Joseph in a dream and warns them to go to Egypt. But something that's interesting in how God provides. We know from the offering that Joseph and Mary gave in the temple, you can read this in Luke, when Jesus was circumcised at 8 days, they were poor. They gave the offering of the poor. Now that tells me the wise men hadn't been there yet with the gold. My math's not so great, but if they had gold, frankincense, and myrrh, they probably wouldn't have been poor. But for those of you who have traveled, it's expensive, isn't it? What would it be like to just uproot, leave everything you own, everything you know, and flee to another country? By the way, Jesus was a refugee. We won't go down that path, but think about that. What would it be like? How did they finance that trip? The only answer I can come to is probably the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. God provided. God knew the danger of their mission. God knew the enemies of Christ who would be after them. And God provided what they needed so that when He said, go to Egypt, they had what they needed to do it. Put God first and trust Him. Is there any way Mary and Joseph could have known 3 wise men would show up at the door with gold? No. No. There's no way they would have known. Understand, the world won't like it, your worship of the King. They won't want you bowing before Christ. And it may even be dangerous. But do not fear. God is faithful. God is able to protect those who are His. God is able to provide. I'm going to tell you, where God guides, God provides. It's His. Trust Him. Trust Him. So let me ask you this Christmas, are you willing to walk by faith? Are you willing to do what the wise men did? Are you willing to do what Joseph and Mary did? And that's trust God to take care of you as you fulfill His calling on your life. Will you trust Him? Will you search for Jesus in your world? So I'm going to tell you, God isn't moving. He's active. God hasn't disappeared from this world. God's doing great stuff. In fact, I was just seeing about a revival meeting. Did you know Franklin Graham has been doing a revival meeting in Vietnam this week? And they're seeing all kinds of people come to Christ. In Vietnam, God's moving. God hasn't abandoned this world yet. We get to that, when the Great Tribulation, when the devil gets to take over and God says, judgment time, then there's 3.5 years that, boom. But I'm telling you, God has not abandoned this world. He is moving. He is active. He is doing stuff. People are still coming to Christ. Churches are growing and booming around the globe. Will we look for what He's doing so we can be a part of what He's doing? Will you do that this Christmas? Will you look for what God's doing? What Jesus is doing in your world? Will you choose to worship even when the world doesn't like it? Will you choose to put Christ first? And will you trust God for the outcome? Will you trust Him for the outcome by actively putting Him first in Christmas? Say, God, I'm going to take a step of faith. I'm going to put You first. I'm going to do what You've given me to do first. I'm going to pronounce this Christmas is about Jesus. And I'm going to trust You for the outcome. Will you do that? That's my encouragement to you, what I think we see and what we can learn from the wise men. Let's pray.